ومثل الذين ينفقون أموالهم ابتغاء مرضات الله وتثبيتا من أنفسهم كمثل جنة بربوة أصابها وابل فآتت أكلها ضعفين فإن لم يصبها وابل فطل والله بما تعملون بصير أيود أحدكم أن تكون له جنة من نخيل وأعناب تجري من تحتها الأنهار له فيها من كل الثمرات وأصابه الكبر وله ذرية ضعفاء فأصابها إعصار فيه نار فاحترقت كذلك يبين الله لكم الآيات لعلكم تتفكرون يا أيها الذين آمنوا أنفقوا من طيبات ما كسبتم ومما أخرجنا لكم من الأرض ولا تيمموا الخبيث منه تنفقون ولستم بآخذيه إلا أن تغمضوا فيه واعلموا أن الله غني حميد الشيطان يعدكم الفقر ويأمركم بالفحشاء والله يعدكم مغفرة منه وفضلا والله واسع عليم يؤتي الحكمة من يشاء ومن يؤت الحكمة فقد أوتي خيرا كثيرا وما يذكر إلا أولو الألباب وما أنفقتم من نفقة أو نذرتم من نذر فإن الله يعلمه وما للظالمين من أنصار إن تبدوا الصدقات فنعما هي وإن تخفوها وتؤتوها الفقراء فهو خير لكم ويكفر عنكم من سيئاتكم والله بما تعملون خبير صدق الله
for recitation. And now, inshallah, we'll start with brother Asif.
بسم الله الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. I greet you with the greetings of the Muslims and the greetings of paradise. Peace and blessings be upon you. I wasn't really expecting to be sitting here in front of the big screen. Had I known this, I would have probably done my hair. Just before we begin, if I can request that anyone who's sitting alone to sit next to someone, I'm sure that person in front of you doesn't really smell that bad. Okay, so if you can just sit next to someone, because I don't like to see people alone, so it's good to kind of sit next to someone, and it kind of contributes to the atmosphere. Okay. I want to request something from you all, and that is, I want you to all close your eyes just for a minute while I talk you through a scenario or a situation that you're all in. Okay, some of you still got your eyes open. That's why I must be the rest. Joke. Okay, close your eyes. Okay, so you're at home and it's 11 o'clock. You walk up the stairs, you open the door, and you get into your bed, and you've had a really long day. So you rest your head on the pillow, and instantaneously, without even trying, you're not counting sheep, you're not thinking about what you did during the day, you instantaneously go to sleep. Now, when you wake up sitting on a train. And when you're sitting on this train, you look around you, and you notice that you are in a first class carriage. There's a meal in front of you. There's other people around you, dressed nicely, and the train is heading somewhere. As you do this, you notice that everything that you need for this journey is there for your disposal. You've got your fork, your knife, food, you got your shoes off, your feet are touching the plush carpet, and you can hear the chatter around you. So there are two things that you will ask yourself. The first thing is, who put me here? Because last night I was in bed and suddenly I found myself on this train. The second question is, where is this train heading? Okay, you can open your eyes. You didn't really have to close your eyes, just do that for dramatic effect. Anyway. So you understand where I'm going with this. It's a very simple question and a scenario that I want you to envisage for yourselves being in. And that example is at the heart of this lecture. Because this lecture is not simply, or this reminder, this talk, this discussion, this dialogue that we're going to have, is not simply something that I will impart some pieces of information, but rather it's there for you to think. To ask yourself fundamental questions about what is the purpose of your life. Now, a friend of mine, he went to one of the best universities in the country, in actual fact, the whole world. Just to get there, you need, like 3 A's in your A-levels, or 4 A's, or whatever the case may be these days. And not only is it one of the best universities in the world, but it is one of the best universities in the whole of the, not in the best university in the country, but one of the best universities in the world. It's not too far from here, it's Imperial College. And what he did is that he took a camera with him, and I would actually suggest perhaps the Islamic Society or one of you guys doing this as well. It will make an excellent experiment and documentary. Where there's actually a presenter who was asking random students, and you have to understand that these students are highly intelligent, really intelligent. I have many friends from the Imperial College, or I used to, and they think on a different level. And they're at that college or that university for a particular reason. There's no such thing as just, getting there by luck. And they will ask fundamental questions. If you were to ask them a really difficult question, a mathematical question, and I'm going to come to a mathematical question very soon, and I'm expecting some of you to answer it, or maybe not, they would be able to answer it instantaneously. And in actual fact, I've given a lecture there, and I asked them some questions, and they are very sharp, very intelligent. You ask them anything regarding sciences, regarding management, about this theory, about that theory, they are able to roll out the answer without thinking. And when they were asked regarding their views about Islam, what do you think about Islam? Do you think women who wear hijab are oppressed? Women who cover their hair are oppressed? And so on and so forth. And they gave their views on these questions that they were asked. Now, one question that they were asked, they had a complete blank face. And that was this question: what is the purpose of life? And when they, in fact, were asked this question, many of them, not just one or two, but many of them, they responded by saying, in all honesty, I haven't really given it much thought. I haven't given it much thought. And that is kind of scary. Many of us, most of us, we're at the age of 20, 21, right? 22, 23 maybe. We lived all of this life, all of these years, and we haven't possibly, maybe, not asked ourselves this question. And even if we haven't asked ourselves this question, it's a question that no human being generally would not ask themselves at one point in their life. Because if we are to give a purpose to everything that is around us, if I were to ask a question regarding what is the purpose of eating, some of us, if not all of us, or many of us would say it's for nutritional reasons. We need nutrition to sustain ourselves, sustain our life. And the answers that we would say, if we had something different to the one that I just said, wouldn't be much different. So there are similar answers, but in essence, you would not be able to come out of an answer which is outside of 2 or 3 answers. And then if I were to ask the question, what is the purpose of dressing, of wearing clothes? What is the purpose for sleeping? What is the purpose of this? What is the purpose of that? And it's not simply an answer that we have been taught. Perhaps we haven't even asked these questions ourselves. In fact, if we were to ask these very same questions to people from a different culture, from a different country, from Pakistan, from India, from Egypt, from Palestine, from Morocco, in different languages, in China, Japanese, some who are from villages and some who are from cities. By and large, generally, they give the very same answers. But when it comes to this question of what is the purpose of life, perhaps many of us haven't stopped and thought about it. some of us may think that the purpose of life is to simply eat, to drink, to work, to acquire material things. That all of this life, all of this universe, this earth that we live on, it has no purpose. So are we demeaning ourselves that much that we give everything a purpose but not ourselves? Because in reality, the purpose that we may attribute to ourselves, whether it be eating or drinking, those are not the purpose of life. That is not the purpose of life. Logically, rationally speaking, it's not the purpose of life. It doesn't answer the question. And this is the reason why it is important to ask this question. It is the question of life. It is at the heart of what is us. But some people, they may say, and they may argue, that there's no proof of any divine origin. That they may say that there's no proof of God. That there's no proof that this universe came through a divine purpose. They may say that perhaps this whole of this earth, everything around us, ourselves, it all came together by chance. And in actual fact, we don't have a definite purpose. Now, this is the mathematical question that I'm going to ask you all. Hopefully, someone can answer it. But if I were to get the classic example, if I were to get 10 marbles, and on each of those marbles, there were numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And then I put it in a bag. And then I challenge someone to pick up each of those marbles in order. So when they put their hand in the bag, they have to pick up marble number 1, and then marble number 2, and marble number 3, in order, without looking. What is the chance of that happening? Anyone doing maths here?
That's statistics.
Oh, alright, statistics, no worries. It's all good. Sorry?
You have to deal with fractions.
What are the chances of a person doing that? Is it 1 to something? Is it 1 to 15, 1 to 20, 1 to 30? What are the chances of that? Of a person being able to take out each of those marbles in order?
1 in 100.
1 in 1, okay, 1 in 100. Any more? Go ahead.
I was going to say, can you ask Google?
You can ask Google, no worries. Go ahead.
9,999,000.
Okay, 9 billion until the end. Okay, interesting. Sorry? 1 over 100, okay, so what's the percent here?
10 to the power of 10.
10 to the power of 10? Okay, so it's kind of proves that none of you guys are in maths and statistics. Okay. Okay, the answer is, it's in actual fact, 1 to 3,628,000. Yeah, he was the closest because 9 billion, he had nothing close to 9 billion, so he was the closest, you're right. Well done, you passed. Okay, so, in order to put out those marbles in order, marble number 1, marble number 2, right to the end to marble number 10, you have a chance, 1 in 3,628,000. And these are just 10 things. 10 things. So if we ponder and we reflect and we contemplate about something which is far more intricate, far more complex than 10 marbles, we would realize that all of this has not come about through chance. It's impossible. If we were 1 centimeter away from the sun, we would die. We would die anyway, but we would die instantaneously, right? From heat, from being cold, sorry. And if we were 1 centimeter closer to the sun, we would die because of the heat. So you find a type of, generally speaking, a type of perfection that is occurring in terms of the way that the universe is moving, is orbiting. It has a specific system. And the fact that it has a specific system, it means that it could not have come about through chance. Another thing is, when we see a bridge, or we see a car, we see a motorcycle, we automatically consider or know that that bridge had come about from people who made that bridge. You need an architect, you need someone who's involved in civil engineering. All of these things, they came together, they designed this bridge, and then when they designed it, they made it. No one would think, when they came across a car, or they came across a bridge, or a house, that it just came out just like that. Something always comes from something. Something never comes out of nothing. Very logical. Something does not come out of nothing. So if we think about all of these things, what about our own selves? Something which is far more complex, like our brains. Our brains are able to think, function, analyze, retrieve, store information. It distinguishes, it categorizes information in a millionth of a second. In a millionth of a second. Then what about the one who designed that brain? The one who created that brain? So it's quite clear that all of this did not come through chance. It's quite clear that all of this did not come out of nothing. On a logical perspective, it must have come from someone. Someone must have designed it in the way that we know it for it to have been designed. And so, I'm not going to be talking about, I'm not going to go through this lecture not answering what is the purpose of life. Because the purpose of life, and having looked at a number of scriptures from different religions, it's very, it's not clear as to what is the purpose of life. I've looked at a number of scriptures before I came to this lecture to see what do other religions say about what is the purpose of life. But the purpose of life is very clear in Islam. And this purpose of life there's nothing which is more clear than the words that God says in the Quran, which is وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ, that I have not created humankind and jinns, who are another creation, except to worship me. So as Muslims, we believe that our purpose in life is to worship God alone. Because when we have these important messages, the most fundamental message of why we are here, then it cannot come in a way that is mysterious, something which is complex. Fundamental questions that every single human at some point in their life will ask, or most will ask, or be asked. It has to be clear as to what the purpose of life is. So what does it mean? What is the main aim of this worship? The main aim of this worship is to worship God. In Islam, as many of you know, and I'm sure even our non-Muslim guests, they know that the God of Islam is called Allah. Now the word Allah literally just means God. If you pick up an Arabic Bible, the way they would translate God is Allah. That's what God means. That's what Allah means. It just literally means God, the one who is worshipped. And so, in Islam, the worst type of crime, a crime which is worse than murder, a crime which is worse than rape, a crime which is worse than anything that you can think of. The worst crime is the crime of associating partners alongside God. Why? Because if I were to give you an example, I went to Birmingham not too long ago, and I was giving a few lectures in one of the courses out there. And I spent the whole weekend in Birmingham, and anyone who's been outside of the M25 would realise that they have a lot better manners than the people in London. And I say that with a heavy heart because I am from London. But if we're honest, we will say this. People are more polite. I remember my parents used to live in Blackpool many years ago. My mother used to speak to the local chemist for 30 minutes, just about life in general, normal chit-chat. That's unheard of in London. It's a hustle and bustle, concrete jungle where people are always in a rush. And so, my hosts, they put me up in a hotel, in a nice hotel, and they took care of me. They fed me. They drove me around. I needed to buy a book for someone. They took me to a bookstore in one of the breaks, and all of these different things. And I felt really embarrassed and quite ashamed. Now, imagine after the whole of the weekend, where they really went out of their way to make me feel welcome and comfortable, I go up to a random person on the street and I say, this whole of this weekend, I just want to thank you. Imagine how those people who sacrificed their time and their efforts and all of this was not, all of what they had done, it wasn't even acknowledged. And this is the same kind of example with God is the greatest, the best of examples, of course. That a person who worships other than God is effectively doing. God created us, He nourishes us, He has put us in this almost perfect earth. He allows us to breathe. He allows us to eat and drink. And even though we may say all of this, perhaps some of us have this question and say, well, I didn't choose to do this. I didn't choose to be, I wasn't chosen, I didn't choose for myself to be in this earth. And that is a valid question. But it doesn't matter how many times you ask this question, it doesn't get away from the fact that we should show gratitude to the one who created us. Logically speaking, rationally speaking. And this is not something that a person, has to, just to give you another example, if a person, if I were to offer you, £100,000 for one of your eyes, or £100,000 for, one of your ears, or your hearing, or your sight, or one of the faculties that you have, you won't do that. You would never sell it. I'm almost certain that you wouldn't sell it. So there are many blessings that God has given us without even us realizing. How many of us really kind of think, I woke up this morning and I want to thank God because He gave me beautiful hair. No one really thinks about that. The only time they think about that is when they come across someone like me and they say, wow, thank God for hair, right? But you have to see someone who is in an unfortunate situation, or in a situation where they are not in the very same place that you are, for us to appreciate what we have. For us to really appreciate that we have legs, that we have arms. We have to go to people who are not fully able. Someone who is visually impaired, We only appreciate these things when we are amongst such people. But instead of thanking God or showing gratitude to God, then we thank someone else. We may thank Jesus, we may thank fortune, we may thank luck. But the one who is deserving of that thanks is not being thanked. And this is the reason why it is considered to be the greatest crime in Islam. Which comes to the next point, and that is the concept of needing God. Now that we know that this universe could not have come through chance, something doesn't come out of nothing, that there is only one God, and just to quite very briefly discuss why there has to be only one God. Because people may say, okay, maybe there's more than one God. That doesn't make sense. Why? Because if I were to say that I've got Ahmed on the right of me, and there's two gods. One God says, I want Ahmed to be alive at midnight tonight. And the other God says, no, I actually want Ahmed to die at midnight tonight. You find that there will be chaos on the earth. There can only be one. There cannot be two or three. Because then we would see chaos being upon this universe. But now, someone may say, okay, you got me. Okay, I believe in God, but I don't really believe in organized religion, and I'm just going to be a good person. So then we have to ask ourselves a number of questions. Who determines what is good? What is the definition of good? And let me just, ask you this question and get some interaction from you guys. What are the reasons a person gives charity? What are the main reasons a person gives charity? You guys don't give charity? It's charity coming up, right?
Seeking the pleasure of Allah.
Okay, seeking the pleasure of Allah. But I want you to look at it from a non-Muslim perspective. Or should I say from an atheistic perspective? Why would an atheist give charity? Sorry? Help another person. Okay. Any other reasons?
Peer pressure.
Peer pressure. Good. We'll get a lot of that next week. What other reasons could there be? Sorry?
You might have the amount of money you needed to help others and sustain yourself at the same time.
Yeah, but what's his motivation for giving the money that he has? The surplus money he has, what's the motivation?
Maybe pride to show that I've got money. So.
Okay, maybe down to fame or pride.
To make them feel good about themselves.
Excellent, to make them feel good about themselves. So those basically, in a nutshell, are the main reasons why a person would generally give charity. Now, if you look at each of those reasons, whether it be fame, whether it be it makes you feel feel good about yourself, and other reasons that you can think about, all of them, they all go down to the individual. They all go down to the person who's giving it. They are doing it because they may feel guilty. They can't see someone in such a devastated state. They're doing it because, I helped someone and it just felt amazing. So if you take all of these, if you were able to kind of categorize or to find a correlation between all of these different reasons, hopefully you'll conclude that all of those reasons are selfish reasons. You're saying it because you want to help someone, okay, but what's the real main reason? People say that, I really want to help someone. But what's the main reason why you're giving money? It all boils down to, generally speaking, and you can do this for many actions, not just charity, about the person themselves. It's about being selfish. And this is the reason why I have a position that I hold regarding why people do good and evil. Why do people do good? And perhaps you'll probably, and we can entertain this, I'll entertain some of these questions at the end of this talk, if you want to open it up a bit more. But if someone doesn't have a belief in God, and doesn't have a belief in resurrection, doesn't have a belief in the day of judgment, then in actual fact, the reasons why they are doing it are for selfish reasons. Because as a Muslim, all of those things which I mentioned are not good reasons. A person, a Muslim, or a person of religion, a person who believes in God and in the day of judgment, generally speaking, wouldn't do it for those reasons, or they shouldn't do it for those reasons. They do it because they want to go to paradise. They do it because they want to keep away from the hellfire. They're doing it because they love God. So there is a concept of love, fear, and hope. But if you strip this away from the argument, the concept of God and the day of judgment, then it's down to the individual. And if it's down to the individual, what does this mean? That good, or our understanding of good, is very subjective. Because according to Nazi Germany, killing Jews was something which was good. So if you are able to deconstruct the argument, it's a really dangerous position to be in. Why? Because if I were to ask any of, a question, if I were to ask this question to any of the non-Muslims, and this came up in one of the debates recently, I was in Egypt at the time, and I was watching it on YouTube, and I was shocked. I couldn't believe the professor said this. One of the main atheist professors, Lawrence Krauss, he said that he hasn't got a problem, scientifically speaking. Generally speaking, he doesn't have a problem in incest, as long as contraception is used. So a brother and a sister being together is not a problem for him. So this is what it's boiled down to. Who determines what is good and what is evil? And in actual fact, some people may say, well, hang on, like example, there's someone that I know, a friend of mine. He told me that he was in one of the countries, and I'm not going to say which country because, to be honest, I don't know which one it is. He didn't tell me. But he said that in one of the countries that he visited, stealing was completely fine. A person, they would steal from someone else, and it wasn't an issue. And he had experienced this. He said that he was with his chauffeur walking down the market, and someone tried to pickpocket his chauffeur. And then, the scene was something like, when he got caught, when he noticed that someone was trying to pickpocket him, he's like saying, "What are you doing?" He says, I'm just trying to take something from you, it's all good. And everyone started laughing. And even the president, subhanAllah, even the president of that country, he said, we don't steal, we just borrow, but we don't really ask about it. Right? So even something that you would consider to be universal, that stealing is bad, is not necessarily universal. But then there are other elements which are considered to be good, such as killing someone unjustly, just killing someone randomly. Everyone, under all cultures, they would realize that this is something which is evil, this is something which is bad. But then we would ask the question, why is it that you're going to use this argument and not that argument? Why is it that you're willing to steal, but you're willing to kill? So it all boils down to, how do we determine what is good? What is good? And then we would ask, who determines what is good? Because taking an example, and it's a very, this is something that one of my teachers mentioned, and I'm only using this as something for us to ponder about. I don't want to be accused of homophobic comments or something like this, because we're talking about it in a very academic way. So homosexuality 30, 40 years ago in this country was considered to be abhorrent, it was not allowed, it was society by and large considered to be something which is wrong. But now it's accepted. Generally speaking in this country, it's accepted. But what's not to say that in 20 or 30 years, we will go back to saying, it was wrong. Can anyone guarantee that we will not go back to that time in this country, that the government will say, it's banned now? Can anyone guarantee that for me? No one can guarantee that. So in the same way, the concept or the standard of what is good, according to society, is based on social circumstances. Which means that good and evil is constantly changing. Which is, generally speaking, very subjective. So who determines what is good and who determines what is evil? We need a God for that. That shows us that we are in need of a God. The one who can tell us what is right, what is wrong. And even, subhanAllah, even like in our times, we have these euphemisms in order to make things more appealing. So instead of using the word fornication, we will say making love. Instead of using example adultery, in order to make it a bit more appealing and less striking, we would say, having an affair. And even STDs, subhanAllah, I remember reading about this. STDs, which are sexual transmitted diseases, right? What is it called now? Does anyone know? It's called STIs now. Sexual transmitted infections. It's no longer called diseases. So these are reasons, these are euphemisms now. They're kind of making it easier. Oh, it's not such a bad thing now getting this thing, this infection, that infection, because it's not a disease anymore, it's an infection. In order for people to be able to accept these kind of things. Now, all of this comes down to, and I want to finish very soon, so I allow their time to be some questions. Don't know about the answers, but certainly some questions. And that is, we may have an appreciation for God. There's many individuals, non-Muslim, Orientalists, they have an amazing appreciation of God and for Islam and in the Quran. Just Google a guy called Bruce Lawrence and write Quran in Google. Some of the things that he says are phenomenal. You would think that this guy is a Muslim because he says that the Quran is something which is incredible, no one could have written this except for God, and so on and so forth, and he is saying things that you would expect a Muslim to say. But he's not, he's a non-Muslim. So there's not just a simple element of appreciation. That, it's a nice religion, it's a nice talk, hopefully, but in the end, it's not something for me. But there is a problem in this, and that is that some people have this understanding that, we won't be tested. That we have this one life, let me enjoy it. But in actual fact, we have to think about, really, is this just the end? You have one person who's very good. They give charity, they help people who are disabled, they help people who are, who have difficulties in learning. They give, they spend a lot of their time, their energy, their money, everything in helping other people. This person dies. And then there's another person who is quite the opposite. He steals from charities, perhaps he's raped people, he's murdered people, and this person also dies. But what is the end result? That they're just being eaten by worms? Will they not be resurrected? Will they not be brought back to life? Will they be tested? And this is one of the reasons why an individual, they left one of the religions, I'm not sure whether it was a Muslim, but they became atheists for 7 days. And when they left atheism, the turning point in their life, or the turning point for them to leave atheism was, will Hitler not be judged for what he did? So as Muslims, we believe in the concept of retribution, of justice. These are things which are within our nature. They are from our fitrah, our natural inclination. We don't need to be told about it. You know, a child who bumps into a chair, and the child or the baby is crying. You can't stop the baby crying. So what do you do with that, with the leg of that chair? You say, naughty chair. And what happens automatically? Straight away, the baby starts to feel that they have gained justice. So if this justice is within the child, then of course this justice will be with human beings. Not just in this life, but also in the hereafter. So, just to finish off, people may think, why should I believe in the Day of Judgment? I can't see it. This is like, like a sci-fi. It's like talking about a sci-fi. It's fantasy. Well, the way that we know this, and the way that it can be proven, matters of the unseen, is through having read the Quran. Once you read the Quran, you will realize, and it will ask you to contemplate about a number of things. It will ask you to contemplate about the Quran itself. It will ask you to contemplate about yourself. It will ask you to contemplate about the things which are around you. And this is what we must do on a regular basis. To ask and to contemplate the things around us. As one of the sayings of the Prophet is, do not reflect upon God, because God is the infinite. He is the unseen. We only know that what He has taught us about Himself. Rather, reflect upon the creation, and that will lead you to knowing that there is a Creator who has also given us all a purpose of life. Thank you all for listening attentively, and I will open up the floor for some of the questions that I'm sure you may have.
Jazakallah khair, brother Asif. Inshallah, if anyone from doesn't have a question, just raise your hand, inshallah. And sisters, if you're willing to write your question on a paper, it's fine, inshallah. Even if you want to ask it straight, it's okay, inshallah. Brother Zakaria will have the microphone, inshallah. So, who has a question for Brother Asif? From the brother side first, inshallah. Any questions? It's a Q&A session, so feel free to ask any question, inshallah. Brother Tariq, yeah? Zakaria.
It's okay, I'll speak loudly.
Okay.
My question is...
So, Tariq, what are you studying?
I've actually graduated, but I did study French and International Relations.
Studied what, sorry?
French and International Relations.
Okay.
My question is, inshallah, regarding sort of seeking purpose in a lot of the things that we do in our life, in general. So, for instance, we have a life purpose, correct? And that is to worship Allah. You mentioned the ayah. So I wanted to ask, how important do you think it is to contemplate and understand the purpose in, say, for instance, going to university to get an education? What is the meaning or benefit in doing something like that? What is the purpose in applying for a job, or maybe seeking to start your own business so that you can be maybe financially independent to go and help more people? Can you maybe just talk a bit about sort of seeking purpose in a lot of the things that we do that we not necessarily contemplate about?
Sure. Okay, so I think effectively what you're asking, for those who didn't hear, is we have a number of activities that we do in our lives, whether it be going to university, whether it be getting a job, and these kind of things. And should we not be asking ourselves, what is the purpose of us getting involved in such activities? So effectively, I think what you're trying to say is that we really should be asking ourselves, what are we doing with our lives? What is our vision in life? And I think this is a very important question. It's not too far off, at least from a dunyawi or from a worldly perspective, which can be connected to the hereafter, to the day of judgment. And so it's kind of related to the topic at hand. And that is, of course, we must have, or we should have a vision in life. What do we want to achieve in terms of our aspirations? You know, what is it that we want to be in life? Whether we want to take this particular career path or that particular career path, what do we want to do? And unfortunately, it's very worrying that we tend to get into degrees that we're not really comfortable with, or we don't really have too much interest in. And part of the reason maybe of our circumstances, because our parents have pushed us in that direction, or part of it is due to simply not really thinking, taking ourselves to stock as to what we want to achieve. And one of the reasons for this is because we are becoming, without saying in a demeaning way at all, I put myself in this very same category, having been seated in the very same chairs that you are in, is that we've become very immature, and we only become mature very later on in life. That we don't take responsibility for our actions until maybe 18, 19, 20, or even some students, some university students that I've been interacted with, unfortunately have got a very immature way of looking at life. And this is at complete odds with the Islamic tradition, because you're an adult at the point of puberty. Islamically, if you are 13 years old, you're 14 years old, you are no different in the sight of God in comparison to someone who's 35. And this is something which is really kind of shocking, kind of strange. But in reality, it's not shocking or something which is quite strange, because if we look at some of the personalities that we hold dear to from the past, whether it be some of the companions of the prophets, whether it be some of the imams, some of the scholars that we follow, many of them achieved great things from a very young age, or at least later on in life, because they had that maturity early on in their life. So we have people like Muhammad ibn Qasim, who was 17 years old when he conquered what is considered to be Pakistan in our times. And we have Usama bin Zayd, who led the army at the time of the Prophet, and amongst the people who are in his army were Abu Bakr, was supposed to be Abu Bakr and Umar, two of the very prominent companions of the Prophet, peace and blessing be upon him. And he was only 17. You have these underground circles taking place not too far from Safa and Marwa, which is not too far from the black cuboid Kaaba, which is in Mecca, in a house by an individual called Arqam ibn Abi Arqam, and he was only 11 years old. So even when we speak to what we would consider to be teenagers and kids and so on and so forth, we really have to speak to them as adults, because they are adults. You know, anyone who's reached the age of puberty, they're considered to be an adult. And one of the reasons that stops us from attaining this type of responsibility is because of the system that we have in place. So, you know, you cannot come out of school until the age of 15 or 16. You cannot, as an example, not that I'm encouraging it, but you know, you can't drink alcohol, you can't smoke until you're at a particular stage. So you don't really come to, you don't really come to a stage of responsibility, and you come to, in actual fact, when you become an adult according to this country, 17, 18, 19 years old, this is the point where you start experimenting. And when you're experimenting, you don't really know what you're doing in life. And this is the reason why I recommend everyone to have kunyas. A kunya is like a nickname, that you are the father of someone, or you're the mother of someone. So example, you're the Prophet, Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, he was approached by this young girl, couldn't have been more than 8, 9, 10 years old. And he gave her a piece of cloth or a present, and he named her Khalid, the mother of Khalid, from a very young age. And this is a fundamental aspect of our Islamic tradition, and that is to have a kunya, to have a nickname. Why? Because you stop acting like a gangster when you start having children, effectively. You stop acting like a hard nut if you start having children. It doesn't matter how hard you think you are, how macho you think you are going to learn how to be responsible when you are living your life effectively for someone else, whether it be your wife or whether it be your children. So this is one of the reasons I feel that it's kind of been stifled. The maturity on how to choose what a vision is has been stifled. Very quickly, because I'm sure there are some other questions as well. And that is, how do we choose a vision? You know, there's actually a number of things. Just as an example, you can, in order to find out what you are good at and what kind of personality you have, there's some really good things that you can use, some surveys that you can use to have a kind of a feeling as to what kind of career path you want to choose. There's some surveys, example, as Honey and Mumford. If you're not too sure what that is, just Google it. They'll ask you loads of questions, and it'll kind of put you on. It'll give you a number of suggestions what you want to do with your life. And what I would say that is kind of disheartening when, especially among some of the Dawah organizations, if you don't have a vision in life, it's like you failed and you're unsuccessful. This is actually incorrect. I don't believe this is correct to have this, because if you were to ask some of the greatest of scholars and some of the greatest of companions of the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, then it is something that they probably wouldn't be able to articulate it in some of the ways that we've been forced to articulate it. But what I would say is to at least have targets. This is very important. Don't live your life without having targets, whether it be related to your home, your family, your studies, and so on and so forth. Hopefully that answers the question, and I apologize that I've kind of gone over with that particular question. But are there any questions related to the topic of purpose of life?
Before we take the questions on the pages, is there any sister or brother wants to ask a question straight, inshallah? Yes, ma'am.
The most common question, one of the most common questions is, if there is a God, if there is a God exists, why does so much?
So one of the most common questions asked is, if there is a God, why does so much bad things happen to people?
Sure, okay, if God exists, why do so many bad things happen in the world? Now, in answering this question, one of my favorite scholars, at least in Tafsir, Uddin rahimahullah, he had a really good answer to this. And he basically said, and I'm sure other scholars have echoed what he said, and that is that there is no such thing as pure evil. There's no such thing as 100% evil. There may be things that happen to us in our lives which are very regrettable, and some things that have happened to us which we wished had not happened. But then that is a test for us. And that is a time or a turning point in our lives. I know someone, talking about myself, I started to become more committed to Islam when I was at college. Before that, I didn't really used to pray that much. I never used to attend lectures and so on and so forth. But then what I thought was a turning point in my life, and certainly what I considered to be a calamity that befell me, was that I was having some personal issues. Now those personal issues, they gave rise for me to turn to God and to plead with Him to take away the problems that I was having. And to get something that wasn't something that I was able to get in the end anyway. So, looking back, even though that was probably one of the worst things that happened to me in my life, would I wish that didn't happen to me? No. I'm glad that happened to me. I'm not happy that it happened to me, but I'm glad, I'm content. I'm glad that happened to me. Why? Because I would probably have a different life. I used to like listen to punk music and probably see someone in front of you who's kind of like got red and orange hair and that kind of stuff. I would have had a completely different path in my life. So sometimes when evil happens, when these things happen and evil is not attributed to God, only good is attributed to God, then it is something that is not necessarily all bad. And this is the reason why there's a very interesting discussion amongst the scholars about one who is rich and he is grateful. And then you have someone who is poor, but he's patient. Who has more reward? The one who has more reward, according to Ibn Taymiyyah, rahimahullah, is the one who is rich, but he's grateful to God. Why? Because a person who is poor, they are patient as a result of their circumstance. But someone who is rich, but they are grateful to God, they are also in. That is a result of their circumstances, of course, but it's more difficult to be in that, to be grateful in times of good. So sometimes we need those times of pain. And if we are sincere and we're honest with ourselves, the greatest prayers that we have prayed, the times when we have turned to God the most, are in the times of difficulty. So sometimes evil is not necessarily something which is completely bad, but there is some good in it as well, and these are forms of points at which we can be turning points in our life, and they can be points at which we can turn back to God and God is us. Okay, a question regarding predestination. If everything in life has been predetermined and all written out for us before our existence, where does our free will come into this? Okay, so there are always questions which revolve around predestination, but something that we must understand regarding predestination, and this is one of the greatest points that Imam al-Tahawi rahimahullah mentioned in his books, in his creed, is that predestination or qadr is the secret of God. It's very difficult for us to understand this. I'm talking about the detail of it, not to say that we cannot understand the foundation. And I'll explain the foundation very quickly. Now, if everything has been predetermined and everything has been written, because as Muslims we believe that God had determine everything that will happen, the way that we live, the fact that we're going to wear these clothes in this lecture theatre on this particular day, all of this has been written, and God knows about it, knew about it, knows about it, and this was written in a tablet 50,000 years before He created the heavens and the earth. This is the belief of Muslims. So someone may ask then, what is the point? What is the point of this? It's very clear what the point of this is from an Islamic perspective, and this is something that many religions really wrestle with and they cannot answer very well. And that is that it is a form of justice from God for us to live out these lives whereby we will have either two destinations, paradise or hellfire. Paradise for the Muslims who have an atom's weight of belief regarding God and they act upon that, they will be in paradise forever. But those amongst them who are sinners, they will be in hellfire for a determined time. But as for non-Muslims, going back to the talk, I said that the greatest crime that a person can do, according to Muslims, according to God, is to worship someone alongside Him. So, knowing that this is the worst crime, then they will be, the ones who do not embrace Islam will be in the hellfire forever. Now, imagine if we were in this scenario. We didn't live our lives and we were put into the respective places which was predetermined, or should I say, known by God. So then, we would say this is unjust. So God has allowed us to live our lives, and there are so many stages on the Day of Judgment, whether it be weighing our good deeds and our bad deeds, whether it be going through the walking upon the bridge, whether it be, so the point is the many stages on the Day of Judgment. God could have easily said, okay, this is your book, take it in the right hand, you're in paradise now, and that's it. But He didn't do that. There's a number of stages that a person has to go through on the Day of Judgment. Why? In order to emphasize, for a person not to have any doubt that they were supposed to be where they were supposed to be. Now, just to kind of hit this home, using this analogy, it's like going up to a beggar, someone who's asking for money, and you say to him that, you know what, I'm not going to give you £10. I'm not going to give you £1 or £5 because I know what you're going to do with it. That's considered to be unjust. Now, of course, with God is the greatest example. So He did this, knowing all of this, regarding us, He allows us to do all of this in order for us to have no doubt that we are deserving of the respective places that we have been written, that has been written for us. Okay, Assalamu alaikum wa alaikum assalam. What is the ultimate question to ask someone that keeps refusing that Islam is the truth and the correct way of life that they see it is? 2 minutes, okay, wow, the ultimate question in 2 minutes. Okay, there is no such thing as an ultimate question to ask someone to convince someone of the truth. Because there's two elements that convinces someone to become Muslim. The first one is the knowledge perspective, the raw knowledge that this is the truth, but this is not enough. Then there is the human perspective, and that is to befriend the person that you're giving da'wah to, the person you're calling to Islam to, because being a Muslim is not necessarily the easiest thing. There are things that they have to give up. There has to be someone holding their hand, not literally speaking, in order to guide them through this journey. I had a number of colleagues. I had one of my colleagues who said, you know what, I completely believe in Islam and everything, but the thing that's stopping me, I'm scared what my parents will say. There's a Polish girl, a Polish lady that I used to work with, and she didn't have any problem with Islam and so on and so forth. But the point is that this was something that was stopping her from becoming Muslim. So sometimes it's not simply the raw truth. It's not just a question that you have to ask someone to convince them or to guide them towards embracing Islam. There's a number of things, and the thing is that you really need to get to know that person. And one convincing thing that I would say, or not convincing thing, but one thing that I would say, if someone is fairly confident that Islam is the truth, I would actually start talking, and this is very strange for some people, but I'd actually start talking to them about the hellfire. The reason why I start talking to them about the hellfire is because, and death, is because it's not like a type of why you're threatening them. It's not this. It is to say to them that, look, you're not going to live forever. There are a number of people who died before they were able to embrace Islam. You need to be quick in doing this. Be firm. I'm going to help you through this journey, but you need to be firm. And I actually mention this, and this is the methodology of the Prophet ﷺ. The first thing that he called to from the people of Quraysh was, in actual fact, telling people about the hellfire. And sometimes we feel a bit uncomfortable. How can we talk to someone about, non-Muslim about the hellfire and these kind of things? Because at the end of it, they're going to just appreciate Islam. It's a nice religion, but there's no reason for me to become Muslim. Okay, next question. Another thing is that every person, you notice that every person who becomes a Muslim, generally speaking, they always have a particular story to tell. There's one thing in Islam that really, that attracted them to Islam. Just to tell you one amazing story that happened, this actually happened in a masjid in South London. My friend was the one who told me this. There was a woman who came with this guy, and he's a clean-shaven guy, and this lady was wearing a niqab, and my friend started to give her some pamphlets because she wanted to keep some pamphlets regarding Islam. And so he started to give da'wah, started to speak about Islam to the person, clean-shaven guy, and he said, so are you, what are your thoughts about Islam and so on and so forth? And he said, no, you're talking to the wrong person. I'm Muslim, but she's not Muslim. And then he said, what's wrong with this picture? She's wearing a niqab, she's wearing a face veil, she's not Muslim, what's going on? So he asked her, he says, why is it that you're wearing a niqab, why are you wearing a face veil? She said, because I saw a documentary about the modesty of women, and I wanted to see who are the most modest women on the face of the planet. And I realized that these were Muslims, and I was very much attracted to the face veil, and at that point, alhamdulillah, she embraced Islam. So every single person is attracted to one aspect of Islam. Every conversion story is quite different. It's not, someone came to me in a dream, or I saw the Spirit. It's nothing like that. It's everyone is different. Okay, you spoke about bad things having a purpose. What about people in Africa? Kids suffering and dying, what is the purpose of this, and how is it a turning point for them? Very good question. When you realize the type of suffering that particular people go through, and it's something which is very devastating, it's all over the world. It's not just in Africa. It's some places in South America, in Syria, in China. Some people are being treated in a terrible way. How is this a turning point in life, in suffering, and so on and so forth? Very good question. In answering this question, it still goes back. It's still a turning point for them, because they will realize that this life is not the end. So the patience that they go through and they endure during this time, and it may have not been a circumstance, of course, that they wanted at all. But they go through this, and this gives them hope. This gives them a hope of another life, of them being resurrected. Like example, the Prophet said that, as an example regarding someone who's an orphan. Someone who's an orphan, the Prophet said that this person will be like this on the Day of Judgment with me. Because the Prophet, Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, was also an orphan. And terrible things that happen to terrible people will be compensated for this on the Day of Judgment. To the extent that someone who has gone through loads of problems in their life, and on the Day of Judgment, someone who has gone through many problems in their life, on the Day of Judgment, wish that they had suffered. This sounds like a really strange thing. And this can be emphasized or understood in one particular hadith, and it's a really powerful saying of the Prophet. And he said that a person will be asked who had a really good life, what kind of life did you have? They said, I used to have this life, I used to do this, and I used to do that, I had the best life possible. But they did this, they followed this life through a life of sin. They were doing things which were prohibited according to God. They will be dipped into the hellfire just for a millisecond. And then they said, they will be asked about this. He says, do you remember anything from your life? They said, no, we don't remember anything of our lives. We didn't do any good. So every single thing that they thought that they had, the pleasure, the delight of this world that they had encountered, they would forget within a second because of the punishment of the hellfire. And the opposite will happen. A person who is going through many problems in their life. They'll be asked, what kind of life did you have? Oh, I had this terrible life. This happened to me, that happened to me. This happened to my daughter, this happened to my husband. I was treated really badly, I was suffering. They will be dipped into the delights or the pleasures or the reward that they will gain for this and be compensated for the suffering that they had endured in paradise. And they'll be asked about this. What kind of life did you have? And they say, Wallahi, I swear by God, we totally forgot what kind of life we used to have. I'm enjoying this moment. So we, first of all, we will be compensated, everyone will be compensated for the pain and the suffering that they had endured. It doesn't matter what type of suffering that they had endured. Just to give you an example, the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessing be upon him, he did not meet his father. His father had died when he was, as he was born. He lost his mother at the age of 6. The person who was his guardian, he had lost when he was very early on, like 11, 12 years old. He had been kicked out of his town from Mecca, and he was forced to go to Medina. So the whole of his community had shunned him. He had lost all of his daughters that had grown up in his lifetime except for one. He had suffered a great deal, but despite that, he was a very content individual. He would smile a lot. He would laugh with the people. And so this shows that the attitude that a person should have, and to know that part of that justice of suffering and the pain and the sorrow that a person feels is that they will be compensated for this on the day of judgment. And
Jazakumullah khair for listening. MashaAllah, brother Asif, a very good lecture, alhamdulillah rabbil alameen. Unfortunately, sisters, we can't take all the questions, but inshallah, brother Asif will answer them, inshallah, and we'll give you the answers back with Allah. I just have a couple of announcements. We have, inshallah, a charity week, which is coming next week, inshallah. We have, inshallah, these envelopes. We're going to give each brother and each sister one envelope. And bi'idhnillah azza wa jal, we're aiming for each brother and each sister to bring in this envelope at least £100, inshallah. It's not impossible. If you ask your brothers, your sisters, your parents, your neighbors, your friends, I'm sure they are willing to give, inshallah, for the sake of Allah. And bring back the envelopes, inshallah, on Friday, not tomorrow, the Friday after. When you come pray in Cavendish or pray in Marylebone, give it to brother Zakaria, and sisters, give it to the sisters, inshallah. That's one thing. The other thing, inshallah, we have a dinner on Monday. You will see the poster, inshallah. We have a dinner on Monday in Cavendish. It's going to be at 5:30 bi'idhnillah azza wa jal. Sheikh Wasim Kemsin will be coming to give a talk, and there will be a 3-course meal dinner, inshallah, and there will be an auction as well. So please make sure, inshallah, you buy your ticket from brother Osama, or the sisters buy from the sisters, inshallah. Make sure you buy your ticket today, because we only have few left, inshallah. So let's aim, inshallah, to have at least 300-400 brothers and sisters for our dinner. Jazakumullah khair for coming. I'm not going to make it long for the sisters as they need to leave, inshallah. Jazakumullah khair for coming, for listening. Jazakumullah khair, brother Asif, for coming as well. And sisters and brothers, they will, inshallah, outside some refreshments, inshallah. So help yourself. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.